episode 82, part 2 of our Killa No Filla podcast with me, Rachel Fairburn, and Kiri Pritchard-McLean. Just before we start, we'll do our usual disclaimer. This isn't hero worship. We do this podcast because of mutual interest in serial killers. As long as we are doing this podcast, it stops us from writing to them in prison.
Yes, we arrogantly thought that this is going to be a two-parter. It's a three-parter at least.
We initially started it, we thought it might be a one-parter.
Yeah, we fucked it, mate. We've absolutely fucked it. Because the more I read about these guys, the more I want to tell you about them. Because we basically did their childhood and then sort of them meeting and the first murder, but I found so much weird, fucked up stuff about the relationship. I thought it'd be weird to miss that out. So this might be the episode that's principally about their relation and how obviously deeply flawed it is.
We left at the point where we said that Doug had come home lying about being in a car accident, hadn't he?
Mm-hmm.
And was covered in blood. So we thought we were leading up to the first murder. But as it turns out, we've got more to say.
We've got more to say. I hope that's all right with you guys. It just means it's going to be another episode. But before anyone starts wringing their hands like it's the worst thing in the world that they can't listen to them all back to back, we're going to record the next one in a couple of days.
I always find it really funny when people say, oh, I've caught up with them all. Like it's a series, like we're a box set.
But I think people do. It's always lovely because I just think that, like, I find it amazing when new people find us. Hello, anyone listening? I think it's lovely because I just think, right, anyone who likes us, and then people who like true crime and don't listen to us, it's not that they don't know we exist, it's that we're not for them, and that's fine. But then when people are like, oh yeah, I've just discovered you, and I'm like, we've been here since 2014. Do you know what I mean? Like,
we're coming for our birthday, aren't we, this month again?
Oh yes, of course. So how old were we? Oh my God, 7 years.
Fucking hell.
If we'd have had a kid together, it would have already picked a favourite out of us by now.
100%.
Yeah, and it'd be you as well, because you'd be like, fun mum. And I'd be like, can you sit down and do your homework, please?
Boo!
Yeah, it'd be like, Rachel. And they wouldn't call you mum, they'd call you Rachel. Be like, Rachel. Rachel says that I'm a creative spirit and I don't need to do stuff like this.
Yeah. Yeah, Rachel says that because Rachel can't be fucking arsed giving you structure and a routine.
Do you know what? Being a parent looks really fucking hard. Fair play.
It looks boring.
It does look boring. There'll be people listening to this staring at their sleeping child with headphones on, smirking, being like, it is boring, actually. I thought it'd be a bit more interesting than this.
Yeah, well, you know, the worst is, like, I'm an auntie, aren't I? So I thought my nieces and nephew would think I was the bee's knees. I mean, they like me, but they could not give a shit.
Really?
Like, they're just not impressed by anything that I do.
Have you tried being a better auntie?
Hey, listen, I'm fucking great. I'm telling you, always getting them little things, and this is the thing. My mum says that I'm too giving with it. She said I need to be
weekend dad vibes.
Let them come to me.
Interesting. Aren't you just like the fun auntie that sweeps in with presents?
Pretty much.
Who's
yeah.
like, and I bet they've got bragging rights as well. I'll be like, my auntie's a comedian on the telly. Is cool.
Yeah, but you know what though? That doesn't impress kids anymore. If I was a TikToker or a YouTuber, that would be like cool. But
yeah,
they're not interested in TV.
Yeah, maybe, but I think when they get older, they'll definitely be interested in comedian as a job.
Well, I hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, these are the people that have got to carry my bloody casket at a funeral. So show some enthusiasm.
If you could have, when people are like, this would be a better game. When people are like, if you could have dinner with, this many people that are alive.
Alive, please.
Yeah. Well, who would be your pallbearers?
Oh, God. Yeah, that's a good question, isn't it?
I think it would just be like the 4 people in tarot.
Whoever's free, to be honest.
Just whoever puts their name down on the rota.
Whoever's free, whoever's not got a bad back. I don't think I could be a pallbearer anyway. I'm too short, I think.
Yeah, you'd set the casket off.
It just wheel me down. I'm not bothered.
Oh, really? Like a trolley?
Yeah, fucking wheel me. I couldn't give a shit. I'm not sentimental about stuff like that.
It's weird, isn't it, that there's like some kind of like imposed dignity on carrying a body on your shoulders. I just think that's mad.
Yeah.
It's another one of those mad traditions we just accept.
It is bizarre and bad for you, I imagine. Mind you, it's only a little short walk, isn't it?
I think I'd just be so in my head about it. I'd be like, there's a body on my shoulder, there's a body on my shoulder. And then I'd be thinking about, like, it's lighter than I thought. Oh, that's heavier than I thought.
Do you know what I think we should do? The body should, like, you know, bride walks down the aisle. We should give the corpses one last walk.
What, animatronic?
Yeah, like marionette strings.
Oh my God, that's so dark. Oh,
Going down
God.
the aisle to their favourite song.
That's awful. Just stinking, wafting past you. I got no strings to hold me down.
Like, and then you get it to the front and you pop it back in the box and put the lid on.
God, that is awful, Rachel. That is so distressing.
I know, it's very early for this as well. We're doing another early shift, aren't we?
We are. This is, we started working at 7. 8:30 we're going to record. So, let us start. We know that he's already done a murder, and he's at the point now where he's sort of regularly patrolling the Sunset Strip, which is where there's lots of drugs, where there's lots of sex workers. So there's a theory that he killed these 3 teens solo, which is Monette Comer, who's a sex worker, Cynthia Chandler and Gina Morano, who was stepsister runaways.
Yeah.
And he picked them up on this area. Now, there's also theories that she was an accomplice from the beginning, and everything that she said about their killings and their career, I guess, as serial killers is not to be trusted. But I guess most of the account we have here largely trusts what Carol says, rightly or wrongly. So, according to Carol, he confessed to these, and she felt like it made them closer together because she became this accomplice.
He kept saying to her, oh, well, all I want is a woman that loves me enough to kill for me.
Yeah. All I want is someone who will change the beds without me asking them.
Just one of my favourite things to do, that.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love getting in a fresh bed, but
Oh, it's the best.
the absolute hell of stripping a bed and then going to bed and seeing it like that. I sometimes think, do you know what, I'm just going to sprint out the window. I can't deal with this.
I never leave it. I change my bed in about 4 or 5 times a month.
Oh yeah, me too, yeah.
I don't understand these people that leave it for months. It's like, you fucking dirty pig.
Well, it's not just dirty, it's also like, oh, what, you're denying yourself the absolute pleasure of fresh sheets.
A nice bath, fresh sheets. I'll tell you what.
New PJs. Yeah.
Oh, new pyjamas as well. Oh, like you feel like a little baby, don't you?
It does feel like that, yeah. I'm like, I bet I smell lovely now, like a new baby.
Bit of Kindle time. Ideal.
So I'm going to roll back slightly because I thought I found everything about Doug's childhood, but I found loads of fucking weird shit. So do you remember me saying that when he was a teenager, he used to record the girls he had sex with? And I was like, I wasn't sure how he was recording them. It was tapes he was making, like a mixtape.
A cassette tape?
Yeah, a cassette tape of like moans and groans. And so he'd basically have sex with a girl, tape her without her consent, and then play it out loud to their classmates.
What a fucking nutter. Sorry, why was no one stepping in at this point?
Oh, I don't know. Well, because that happens now with, like, revenge porn, which there's something in a second I'll talk about, which is very similar to that. And people barely know what to do. And now we understand sort of, like, consent and, you know, you don't slut shame. So fucking back then, there's no way they would have been like, come on, respect her right to privacy.
True.
The teacher probably would have taken the tape home and pulled his spine out to it.
Oh, God, don't. Oh, God.
So he got a girlfriend when he was 17. She was only 14, called Bobby. And it was like his first love. And she was like massively in love with him. And he used to take photos of her in like various states of undress. Then he'd get them developed and he'd hand them out at school.
Right. Okay.
Can you think of anything worse when you're 14 years old?
Jesus Christ.
Than your like vag being chucked around the playground?
What is this guy doing?
Oh, God, honestly, it'd be my worst nightmare. He also got in trouble. This is really interesting. When all the crimes come out, they go back to obviously interview his parents and be like, hey, was any of this behaviour sort of, you know, like, did you spy any of this? And they were like, no, he had a perfectly normal childhood. But at this time, like, he didn't have a normal childhood. He lived everywhere. By the time he was like 16, he'd got done at school for stealing someone's bike. He'd also got done for writing a really erotic letter to one of the teachers.
Oh my God, what a dweeb. Oh God, what a dweeb.
That's not what you should be taking away from that.
Oh, you fucking square. That is so embarrassing. That's as embarrassing as the people we heard about who were in the 20s shagging Mick Jagger.
Do you not think that there was one teacher at every school that everyone fancied?
No, well, yeah, there was, but I used to look at people going, "Are you fucking pathetic or what? Who fancies a teacher?"
No, I mean, no one was writing well, I'm sure they were actually, but I wouldn't have never have written a letter, but I think you could think, whoa, they're quite fit. You know, when you're, like 15 or whatever, and there's a 26-year-old teacher, like...
I had no respect whatsoever for fucking teachers, so I'd be like, no, thank you. I used to think it was pathetic when, like, girls would be like, "Oh my God, Mr. Bridge is so gorgeous." It's like, fucking grow up, you absolute dweeb. Britpop's happening, and you're fancying the English teacher.
Yeah, but they're not going to fuck Damon Albarn, are they? But, like, the teachers are wrong and they could have a go at that. Oh,
it makes me... No, I hate it. I absolutely hate it.
Sometimes I think proximity makes someone more attractive. Like, people who say, like, COVID fit, because you've had, like, cabin fever and you don't go out and meet people and suddenly people start looking fit. I had that when I had a summer job as a chef once. I was like, I think I fancy this guy, but I realised it was because it was the only man that I was coming into contact with that wasn't related
guy
to.
That you knew.
Yeah, that was literally it. What was I saying? Oh, yeah, so he wrote this letter. Now, when they reported it to the parents just didn't do anything, didn't really react. And in fact, while he was away at this Culver military school, his mum only came to visit him once in the whole time he was there. So that's quite an unusual set of circumstances,
but
right?
He's a weirdo, so would you want to see him?
There is that, yeah. Be like, I've got to go visit my weird son on his stolen bike who just keeps playing tapes out loud of his teenage girlfriend having sex with him.
So weird.
So 1967, he's 19 years old. He's graduated now from Culver and he goes to live back with his parents. About this time, he's drafted into the Air Force and he realises, like, oh shit, I don't want to be on the front line with Vietnam, so I'm going to do radio intelligence because that's a way of being much further away from, like fighting. So he does that in Texas and then in Anchorage, and he used to decode Russian messages. So he's a very clever guy.
So he says.
Oh, you think it was just bullshitting?
Yeah, fucking...
He's like, this is just bread and sausages. It's just a shopping list.
Yeah, it could have been. You never know.
I love... As you know, Rachel, charity shopping. I had a really good Mac. I don't even know where it is now. A bright green, like, vintage Mac from the 60s that I got from a Chazza shop. Ooh. One of my favourite things about it was... I quite like it when this happens. Not when it's a tissue, but went in the pocket and there was a shopping list in it still. And it was like... I remember it was like bread, sausages, bacon, butter, eggs. Like, everything you'd sort of expect from yesteryear. And... a little thing in the corner saying, "Don't forget to get stamps." And I've actually framed it. It's up in my house. I just thought it was a lovely little insight into someone's life.
That's cute, isn't it?
Yeah. I found worse things in pockets.
Yeah, I do hate it when you find a tissue.
Tissue's the worst. Tissue's the worst.
Think, ugh. Yeah.
But also, okay, this is so boring, but I don't know when it happened. I think it's the last 18 months. I don't think it's a COVID thing, but because my mum has it as well. I've got to the age where I'm like, I think I need to start carrying a tissue with me because my nose gets really runny.
Just up your sleeve?
Like, not up my sleeve, no. And I've bought some nice hankies because I don't want to be that person with a bit of kitchen roll hanging out of there.
No, you're going to be that person.
No, I'm not going to be that person, Rachel. I'm working very hard not to be that person. So I've bought some nice hankies and but then I forget them. So basically, just the whole time I'm like, what if this drip falls off the end of my nose?
What's going on there?
My mum has it. My mum used to call it, because my mum used to horse ride, she used to call it the dressage drip, as in, like, when you're cold, like, it fall off your nose. And that has started happening to me. That's it now. That was basically my body's way of going, the life force is dripping out of you bit by bit.
Oh,
so
no.
It's like the petals on that rose in Beauty and the Beast. Every time one falls, I'm just one step closer to, I don't know, turning into a clock. I've not thought this through.
No, you've not, have you? I told you what Tim says about Cogsworth, haven't I?
No.
He said, God, that clock in Beauty and the Beast that just barks orders.
Well, he doesn't like his tone.
Yeah, he doesn't like his tone. Just barking orders.
So funny. Tim's just so nice in every way.
We should mention this. We've had prudish boyfriends for the past week, haven't we?
Oh my fucking God.
I don't know what's happened.
Yeah, what was I saying?
So it was that song. It was Laid by James.
Okay, yeah, so I was like, you know, sometimes you get a song in your brain and you're like, I've got to listen to it to get it out. So I said, oh, can I put a song on? When he was going to work the other day, I was like, yeah, go for it. So I put on Laid by James and I was singing along. Very early in the song it goes, she only comes when she's on top. And he sort of recoiled and then opened the window. And I was like, I've not farted. He's like, no, I just think this song's a bit much. Like getting air into the car. I was like, why is he suddenly clutching his pearls? He's like, I just think it's a bit much. It's like, what is this? Do you know who you're going out with?
Yes, this is what I don't understand. So
bizarre behaviour.
So I went to Lincoln. I've never been to Lincoln before, and I had a look around the cathedral. So I'm just, having a look around the cathedral, and I said something like, "Oh fucking hell, look at this!" And Tim was like, "Can you not swear?" I went, "Swearing isn't a sin, actually." And then I did make a joke about a priest being a paedophile, which was very hack of me. And then he told me after that, and I was like, "Who the fuck are you, the venerable bede?" Going around, and he was doing that walk, like going round the cathedral. You know this sort of tourist walk where people have their hands behind the back with a pamphlet in it. He was doing that, and then he said, "Oh, why do you have to be such a horrible little woman all the time? It's like you've come down off one of the carvings and turned into a nasty little creature." I was like, "I haven't done anything." Anyway, a nice day out. Got home. We're having tea with his mum and dad, and they just had like a general playlist on Spotify or whatever. And on the playlist, Perfect 10 by the Beautiful South came on, right?
What a great song.
It's a cheeky song, I think. It's not rude, it's just cheeky. So Tim, then in his venerable bede attitude, goes, "Oh, really? I'm turning this off." And everyone was like, "What's the matter with you?" He went, "Huh." And he got the lyrics up, and he went, "When he's at my gate with a big fat 8, you want to eat to this, do you?" We were like, "All right." And then he just sort of like flounced off. I imagine to go and listen to some Gregorian chanting or something. But
well, do you know the other side of this is that he messaged me and he said, right, well, I can tell this is going to be on the podcast, so just so you know, Rachel's been swearing around a cathedral and then accusing all the priests of being paedophiles and then saying that I'm the venerable bede.
Well, I mean, I made one joke about a priest being a hack joke, right? I went, "Oh, look, there's a paedophile. It's not often you see one in the wild," right? Stupid little joke. I said fucking hell at something, which isn't a sin. If I'd have said, Jesus Christ, that would have been unacceptable.
Mm-hmm.
But he's so like taken in by reverence and grandeur. I think it has a real sort of effect on him. I don't know, sort of if something's, what's the word, sort of historic and like for example, I did a gig at Oxford University a couple of years ago. And he came with me and he was like, "Oh, take a picture of me in the grounds." Why? Who gives a shit? I just think he's quite impressed by stuff like that, historic things, which I am as well, but, I'll still swear in a cathedral.
Yeah, sure.
I lit a candle. What more do you want?
I think it's quite a nice sign that he's like that and has some, I guess, reverence for tradition and decorum, unlike you dragging yourself around the place swearing.
But then I did say to him, I said, I was thinking about, the James song, and then I was thinking about Perfect 10. And I was like, these men go out with us.
Yeah.
When did this suddenly become so... like,
oh, yeah. Yeah, he's not blushing when he's... Don't you worry about that.
Oh, no. Oh, the iPad's fallen over. That's really made me laugh. Oh, dear me.
Anyway, away from our prudish boyfriends. So he's doing this translation into Russian, allegedly. And about this time, he's honourably discharged with full benefits and a National Defence Service Medal. Now, they obviously later on, the police go, why was he discharged from the army? Is it something we need to know about? And they're like, we couldn't possibly say. But Doug said it was because he testified in a case against a soldier where I think it was a white soldier killed a black guy. And he testified that he was a witness to it. And So that, I'm like, oh, well, that was a good thing to do. but it obviously doesn't undo all the other stuff. So he's got like a wedge of money. He had about 5k. I don't know if that is like a severance pay or whatever. Mm-hmm. And he's in Alaska and he's like, do you know what? I'm going to drive down to Mexico. That's what I'm going to do with all this money. Now he goes to Van Nuys, and that's where his sister Carol Ann lives. Now, what is depressing about this is every new person who gets introduced into the story, there's just an air of tragedy to them. Yeah. So Carol Ann she's really sort of like, his sister, she's living in this house with an abusive husband that she can't get away from. So, like, it's just another tragic thing. Ugh. He's 24 years old at this point, and then he meets Beverly, also my mother's name, and he marries her. She's 27 years old, so they live in North Hollywood together. She's a blonde lady. She's described as heavy, which just means that she'll be thinner than I am, but she used to see herself as like fat and ugly. So when Doug, who was deemed as quite handsome back then, started giving her attention, it was a big boost to her. And she was like, do you know what? He's not like the other men I've had in my life. He's really ambitious. So she was really...
He's not like the other men. He's actually worse, as it turns out.
Yeah. Well, I think weirdly it was always there, but he goes really wild later on. Whereas I think when he was with Beverly, it's almost sort of normal. Mm-hmm. So... he had this ambition, he wants his own business, so he buys a car upholstery business. Very weird detail, that, because it was in the last episode we did as well, right?
Yeah, it was. The Thingy and What's It.
Thingy and What's It, yeah.
You know, Thingy and What's It. Ant and Dec, what they called. The Hillside Stranglers, one of them had a car upholstery business.
Yeah, he did, yeah. So... they got this car upholstery business. Now, he would run it all and Bev would do the books of the weekend and she'd give him advice and she's like, do you know what? If we do this, we could make this much more money. And he was like, listen, I'm the brains of the operation. I won't be taking any of your advice. I'm the clever one. You just do the books. Okay. So by the time we get to sort of like the 70s, he's run the business into the ground. He's not very good at it. So he sells it, just tries to get rid of it, but he's still massively in debt. So he starts working in a service station as a security guard. Obviously now that job's been replaced by a cardboard cutout of a police officer. That is... they're amazing, those.
That's a very specifically British joke, that.
It is, yeah. So if you're listening from somewhere outside the United Kingdom, or maybe just a nice area, what they have is in service stations, they have a cardboard cutout of a police officer in the window. So I think if you're pissed, you might go, oh shit, there's a copper there, and avoid it. Yeah. I think that's the logic, right?
And often you have them in the pound shop window as well.
Really?
Yeah, the pound shop. There's one near me, actually, the pound shop window. It's like, it's not fooling anyone anymore. Imagine being the model for that, though. Like, that was somebody's paid job.
They've been there years now, so I wouldn't be surprised if that person's dead. Like, and it's just
R.I.P. Cardboard copper.
Yeah, but also, like, what if you were married to him? Just every time you go and fucking get 5 litres of unleaded, which you'd be lucky to do at the moment because there's a petrol shortage, that you're like, oh, there's my husband. Or if he cheated on you, or kicking it to death in a fucking shell garage.
Imagine the arguments you could have, like, after a few drinks going, well, I tell you what, the cardboard cutout's better in bed than you are, actually. Oh, I'd love that.
At least the cardboard cutout only goes soft if it gets wet. You're the opposite.
Oh, God, don't. Oh.
Do you know what? There's a road that you could drive up through, a very beautiful road that drives up through North Wales, through basically the Snowdonia mountain range. It's called the A5, listeners. And it sort of goes up. So I was basically doing a gig in Llangollen, so I was driving up, like, past Corwen and stuff. And there's a village that you drive through where obviously people drive too fast. So they have got almost like a scarecrow thing in a police jacket, like a high-vis police jacket on the side of the road. So you slow down thinking, oh, is that an official? Which is fine. But they've also sort of laminated on a man's face. So it's not just like a plain head. And what happens is people massively slow down because they've laminated it and it's sort of like bleached out by the sun. The man looks really unwell. You think you're watching an old man in a high-vis about to leap out onto a road because he's incredibly ill and he's beyond medical help.
And people just keep stopping and going, oh my God, are you all right?
I'd argue it's more of a hazard because you've just got this like, oh God, what's wrong with that man? What's he seen? And then you're like, oh no, it's a piece of cardboard they've laminated for a face. I'm going to find a picture of it because
I need to see this.
It honestly looks like something like from a crime scene.
Jesus.
When they've like, oh God, it's really chilling. I'll find a picture and I'll send it to you.
Speaking of which.
So he starts doing this security guard job, but he also starts buying things at auction to resell, which is, I mean, each to their own, but he wasn't great at it. And poor old Bev is like just going along with it. And he was like, you're not allowed to buy things. You don't know what you're looking for. Your job's to load and unload the van.
Oh,
so she was basically a labourer. And she later said, God, it was a really bad marriage. He was lazy. He used to wear my pants all the time.
It's hard to find some pants when you're in a rush anyway.
Oh, fucking tell me about it.
Yeah,
imagine ones that you like watching his bollock poking out the bottom of them. He'd always want to have threesomes. He wanted to go into wife swapping as well. And so she just got really, really unhappy and she gained more weight. There's a lot of stuff here that's obviously defined by people's weight, but this is her narrative of it, so I'm not going to leave it out just because it's inherently fat phobic. She was just basically at home feeling shit about herself. He was spending more and more time out of the house, staying over places she didn't know where. He'd also drink too much, and when he drunk, he'd get really bad anxiety, and his anger would be an issue. But it was the anxiety in particular, which is it's interesting. I guess I've never thought about it, but how closely booze is linked to anxiety. Like, obviously, most of us get beer fear the next day, but like how, you know, if something pops up, it just feels like if you're pissed, you just can't deal with it as well. Do you know what I mean? If like, you know, an emergency, you're like, like. I
mean, it's no thing that, you know, I used to cane it quite a lot. I think it's fair to say. I mean, I do still like a drink now, but my anxiety and depression were fucking awful. I'd say about 4 years ago.
Really?
And then it's like, oh, I've cut down on this. Also, I've made myself a bit happier by changing things in my life. There's that, you know, the two go hand in hand, don't they? I mean, obviously, it sounds like, oh, I had a drink problem. I didn't. I just liked a fucking pint. But, yeah, it definitely has a negative effect on you. And sort of productivity is poor. I mean, I went for a drink for the first time in ages with my mates in Manchester the other night after my show.
Is that when you sent me a picture of an injury?
I fucking cut my head on a table. But I think the blame here lies with the Ibis Hotel.
Here we go.
Listen, yes, I'd had a few drinks, but there was, I remember, I stayed there for 2 nights and I noticed there was a table in the shape of a cloud, because they do this thing of like, here, it's weather themed, it's like, just paint the walls. Anyway, the table was in the shape of a cloud, and it sort of was one of those that you put over the bed and, you know, you can work on it.
Oh, yeah.
And I was like, this is dangerous, this table. I bet somebody could really smack their head on that, and, you know, because of the shape of it and stuff, and it's not in a corner. Anyway, lo and behold, what happens? Poor old Ferbs over here smacks her head in the middle of the night on it. Look like Mikhail Gorbachev. It's really like, you know when you sort of, your skin's healing and it looks worse.
Yeah.
I can see people looking at it as well, like.
You're gonna have to start wearing a hat. You're lucky it's hat weather now.
The thing is though, scabs, I just associate them with being like 8 again.
Yeah, do you know what I hate when they itch?
Yes. But also, don't you think it's amazing how your body heals?
Yes, it's absolutely incredible. Absolutely incredible.
To the human body.
Anyway, so Bev persuades Doug to join Alcoholics Anonymous, which is really great of her. And they stay together, and he has 2 years where he's absolutely clean. And Bev just sounds really incredible. She encouraged him. She's like, go and get a job that's more stable, that's less precious. So he starts working as the steam plant trainee. So 1976, they've been together 4 years, and they separate and divorce, but they stay close friends. She does stay in his life. So what's sad about this is with both Carol and Doug, they at some point have had partners that have been really invested in their welfare. Mm-hmm. But they have it's kind of like they just don't know how to be loved or how to love someone else properly. So he's 31 years old, and this is when he meets Carol. So I told you already about how he went out sort of cruising bars for women that he thought were basically vulnerable. And he tended to go for women who were sort of conventionally not attractive and overweight. And when I was talking to you about this, Rachel, I was like, do you think he did that because the world tells fat women that they might as well be dead, that it naturally gives you low self-esteem? Like, it's very unusual to find someone, especially at that time, who is deemed overweight or is fat, basically, and has got high self-esteem. So I guess it's a shorthand. If you're like, oh, she's fat, she must think that she's a piece of shit. That's my theory.
I think maybe it's like a assumption. I mean, there's plenty of thin women with low self-esteem.
Yeah, of course.
But I do think probably a factor, because it was something that I imagine would be allowed to play, sort of be like, oh, well, you put weight on or whatever. I imagine he'd just use everything about you to be manipulative.
Oh my fucking God, well, he is manipulative. Like, some of this made my blood run cold when I was reading it, because it's like, it's just that thing of, yeah. So basically, he's 31 at this point, meets Carol. He's sort of blonde and handsome, and he's living off all these sort of vulnerable, unattractive older women, in his words. And he's got this very privileged upbringing that sort of remains. So he doesn't think he should have to work, really, because he thinks, well, I'm not from the kind of people who should have to work. So he's trying to carve out a lifestyle that's parasitic, essentially. Uh-huh. And he also had like sort of illusions of grandeur. He had this sort of slightly European accent from going to this international school. And he also used to throw like French phrases into things.
Oh, I hate
so
it.
people were like, yeah, but people were like, he's so classy. But it just sounds like Del Boy to me.
Well, I was going to say, imagine like he's throwing these French phrases in. He'll be saying things like, yeah, and it was then that I thought, well, croque monsieur. Doesn't mean it made any sense, does it?
Now, with Carol, he meets her. We've talked about the meeting before, but he bonds very quickly with her kids in front of her. So he was like, can I tuck them in? Can I read them a bedtime story?
No, you can fuck off, you weirdo.
But she's like never been with anyone like this, so she just thinks, God, this guy's amazing. This gorgeous guy is like more than I can ever believe. And then she moves him in very quickly. The first time they slept together, this is the thing that made my blood run cold, right? So the first time they had sex, he was like whispering in her ear while they were doing it. He was like, oh my God, you're so beautiful, you're so clever, I've never been with anyone as beautiful as you. And he would enjoy pleasuring her, and that was the first, or he would appear to anyway, it was the first time she'd been in a relationship with someone where she just didn't have to, wasn't expected that she would automatically do all of the work in the bedroom. Mm-hmm. And so she just like has this incredible night with this guy, and then wakes up and he's like looking down at her, looking really sad. And she's like, what's wrong? And he's like, oh no, I don't want to talk about it. She's like, no, what's wrong? And he was like, oh, it's just my landlady. She's like just making things really hard for me at the moment. She keeps saying that I need to move my stuff out. And she's like, well, you can keep your stuff here. And he's like, no, I couldn't do that. Ugh. And he's like, no. She's like, honestly, it would be no problem. I'll help you move. And he was like, okay, well, if you're sure. Which is such a classic, amazing bit of manipulation that I've like seen and experienced, where they're so good at doing it that they convince you to convince them. Oh God. So then you feel like they haven't asked, but of course they still have asked and made you do it. You just don't realise. So...
Also, keep your own shit at your own house, for fuck's sake. Space is precious. Piss off. Go to a storage unit.
Well, this is the thing is, we talked about this later. We realised when we were talking about all this jumping around different women and things, I don't think he ever had an apartment as soon as he got with Carol.
No, he doesn't seem to have, does he?
No, so he'd like live with her for a week and then he'd fuck off for 2 weeks because he'd be banging someone else, and then he'd come back. But anyway, I'll get on to that later. So one of the things he does is, after this first night, he said, because he likes wearing women's pants, he went, hey, this might sound a bit weird, but can I have a pair of your pants? And she's like, that is weird. And he was like, it's just because we had such a great night, I sort of want to keep them close to me and have them near me, and I feel like there's a part of me with you. And she's like, oh, okay, well, that's quite romantic. So she goes and gets her pants. She's only got those like massive cotton ones that start under your tit line and go right the way down. So she brings them out, and he went, nah, it's all right, actually. And And then, although obviously she takes it as like a rejection, she's like, oh, well, I mean, he's still really nice.
Oh, no.
Now, during this time, she is still sending Jack love letters saying, listen, I'll wait till you leave, Jeanette. Don't worry about that. Like, I'm here for you. And he replied going, leave the area. Like, I'm absolutely done with you. You have to move out now of these flats. So she moved to Limona Avenue. And in fact, Jack and Jeanette helped her move. They were like, yep, we'll help you move out of here. Don't you worry. So they move her over. And then he was like, don't worry, I'll give you a call. And then he leaves and he doesn't ever call. He never phones her. But he does drop round up to 3 times a week to have sex with her.
Ugh.
And afterwards, he would be like, oh, God, I'm really struggling for money. And she would give him money because that was the relationship. So they had this, like, basically, transactional relationship that was... She's just being exploited. Now, Doug and Jack absolutely fucking hate each other. And she thought, well, it's because they're jealous and then they're both fighting over me.
Yeah, they're fighting over a woman that looks like Reg Holdsworth.
Oh, my God, Reg Holdsworth. I'd forgotten he existed.
Give it a Google if you're not from England again. Reg Holdsworth, character in Coronation Street. Big glasses.
Brilliant character as well. Did he go out with Bet?
No, he married Maureen, didn't he?
That was it. Was it Alec Gilroy who went out with Bet?
Alec Gilroy, yeah, married Bet.
Reg Holdsworth, love it. So they don't like each other, and then she's talking to Doug about how Jack treats her, about sort of how badly he's fucked her over, that they have this joint account. Oh no, she's basically talking about how badly he treats her, that she's really sort of fucked over, that he's uses her for sex. And Doug's like, oh, okay. And then he's like, yeah, and I've got this joint account with him that he can access money from. And he was like, what the fuck? And that's when he's like, you need to get this man out of your life. And then she's like, oh, he really loves me. He's trying to protect me. But it's actually, all he does is go, you need to close that joint account. And then she was like, oh, no, I don't want to do that because he might need it. And he really takes a knock at this. He's like, I can't believe you're not closing it down. Why wouldn't you respect what I say? And Carol, man. She takes this as a sign that actually Doug's in love. And that's why he's so upset that I won't take his advice.
You know what? I hate everybody in this. I hate every single person in this.
Yeah, it's an absolute... Well, no, every now and then someone nice comes in and they never last. We'll talk about one of them in a minute. So Carol takes this sort of like how upset he is about the money and things as a sign that, right, this is it. He's in love now. And Doug is using her financially. He never pays rent. He lives there as much as he wants to and then he'll fuck off and shag someone else. And she could afford it as well because by this time she is working as a vocational nurse at the Valley Medical Centre. So she's doing really well. Now, about this time, this is so dark, Doug reads an article about true love is actually being shown to be fulfilling your lover's fantasies. And I'd argue that's true. And some of us have fantasies of someone putting the bath mats in a wash that isn't you. And so,
cleaning the plug hole of the fucking hair that goes down it.
Oh my God. Yeah, that is... Yeah.
Do you know, I think that's one of the worst things in the world.
What? Plug hole hair?
Oh my fucking God. I clean it because, you know, I've got the longest hair really. But I have to mentally remove myself from what I'm doing.
What, you have to disassociate?
Yeah. I have to completely think about something else.
I'm not bothered. I'm not. Well, I don't love it. Do you know what it is? Do you remember I said that I worked as a chef and I fancied this guy for a bit because there was no one else? He looked like a bit that you'd pull out of the plug hole.
Oh, God, don't.
So I'm like, you know what? I've kissed it before now. It's absolutely fine.
It's fine. He looks like a bit from the plug hole. Oh, dear.
Also, like, I've got really thick hair. My partner's got really thick hair. We regularly shower the dog, who has 2 coats. Like, if I wasn't used to hair by now, do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
I can't be shy about it. It's just a very hairy household. So he'd got this idea about sharing these fantasies. So he goes, hey, Carol, like, tell me your deepest fantasies and I'll tell you mine. So when he says his, he's like, he tells her all this, like, fucked up stuff to do, obviously to do with sex and death. And the one that she liked the most was the idea of catching a young girl and locking her up and keeping her as someone that he could basically use as a sex slave.
Ugh.
And she was like, yeah, I like that one, but I could be the person that you captured. I could be the young woman. And he's like, yeah, or someone else. And she's like, yeah, I could do it though. And he's like, yeah, or someone else though.
By this point as well, Carol's already got the 11-year-old neighbour, Shannon, involved because he wanted to take pictures of her. So they've got her in under the pretenses of God knows what, and she's let him take photographs of the kid.
Absolutely mad. Yeah, she basically facilitates that. He spies this 11-year-old next door, and he was like, I want her. And Carol's like, okay, I'll make it happen. It's so fucking mad. So they start to get into, like, experiment with bondage and domination to sort of, I guess, is part of this fantasy fulfilling. And he's, like, trying to test Carol's limits. And he was like, I couldn't find them. Sexually, I couldn't find any limits.
Wow.
So he starts to mention in these fantasies murder, and that actually true love was about killing together. And she doesn't really push back on it. In fact, his fantasies get more and more extreme, and he says, oh, there was a girl I used to go out with and she really was into necrophilia. And she just sort of giggled when he told him. So he's like, I think this person might be on the same wavelength as me. So he's flitting in and out of her life, which keeps her really insecure. So he'll sort of turn up and love bomb her, I think the phrase is. So like be like there and really present, and then he'll go weird, and then he'll disappear and then not see her for ages, and then he'll come back again like nothing's happened. So she doesn't know her ass from her elbow. So one of the times he's away, she answers a personal ad, which I think is a shame that it's a dying art form.
Yeah, as I was saying, I remember these when I worked at the library, and that was, I'd say, less than a decade ago. I must have been reading these in the Manchester Evening News, you know, like the little PO box ones. Like,
yeah,
you'd leave a little, like, not a PO box, you'd ring up the number on the answer phone or something, wouldn't you? Like,
yeah, I think that was cute.
Solvent male looking for someone to enjoy pub lunches with, long walks, and dry bumming.
Do you know what? Apart from the dry bumming, absolutely fucking sign me up.
Sounds quite nice, doesn't it?
Yeah, pub lunch. Do you know what? I hadn't realised until you said that. I was like, I think that's my fantasy, is a fucking pub lunch.
It's so funny now, like, everything that I enjoy doing now is mainly like, let's go for something to eat.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, all my social stuff is around food.
It is,
I love
isn't it? Like, I think once you get into your 30s, that's what it is, isn't it?
Also, because, like, I think it's quite an intimate thing, eating can be. So, like, you would want to do it with people that you like. You know, when you've got to go for food with people you don't know.
And you can't enjoy it.
It's a restaurant. You can't enjoy it because I'm like, right, well, because I'm fat, I can't order what I want, because they'll all be thinking, okay, we see why you've ended up here. So I have to order something that's, like, not what I want. And then also have to be aware of how I'm eating it. And if it's somewhere posh with weird shit, oh my fucking God. You know these places that are, like, theatre, and they're like, so you're looking at it and you're like, how am I meant to eat this? And they're like, however you like. And you're like, you don't mean that, because if it was up to me, I'd pick up the plate and tip it down my neck. Yeah. So just tell me what part I'm meant to pick up or not pick up.
I totally agree. Like, there's nothing worse than someone going, oh, we'll go and get food before a gig. I'm like, no, thank you. I like to eat after a gig, alone preferably, the way I want, reading what I want, looking at what I want, and not talking to you.
Absolutely. I want to eat in the hotel bed on the side that I'm not going to sleep on, and then roll over to the crumb-free side, and I want to put a towel over the mirror like a budgie, trying to get it to sleep so I don't have to watch myself eat in the mirror. That's what I want. I don't want to go for a curry with you before I've got to go on stage and have adrenaline pumping through my veins as well as garlic and cumin.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I get no pleasure. I can't eat before a gig anyway, really.
Same.
A good few hours. But the treat is, oh, great, I've done my gig. Now it's food time.
Yeah. Also, adrenaline makes you so fucking hungry. Like, when it drops out, you're like, oh my God, just want to eat everything.
Yeah, exactly.
So, back to this personal advert. There's a guy on there, and he was basically looking, he said, for sort of a decent and marriageable woman. So his name is Art Pollinger, and he was a stereo company executive. He's on, at that time, bear in mind, 100 grand a year. Oof. So this is an incredibly wealthy man. Now, he wasn't very handsome, and he also he's a big boy, right? He weighs 400 pounds, which is about 28 stone. So he's, like, unusually large. And then he meets Carol through this personal ad, and he thinks she's great. He's like, God, she's really intelligent. She keeps the house lovely whenever she comes around, and he really wanted to marry her. And she liked that he treated her really well. And she started to open up and confide in him about everything she'd been through and the sexual assault and her relationship with Jack and how damaging it was. And again, told him about the joint safety deposit box. And he was like, absolutely not. This is, you're being abused financially as well. So he takes Carol to the bank the next day and she withdraws the money from the safety deposit. And there's $6,000 missing from it. And Jack's signature is on the slip twice. And she was absolutely gutted. But she was like, oh, no, he must have needed it and forgotten to tell me. Or, oh, no, actually, I think he did say it, something I must have... She makes all these excuses to Art and tries to cover their ass. And he said, listen, just take it out and put it in a checking account. And if he needs it, he can ask you for it. And she's like, okay. And so they have this kind of nice relationship for a while. And in the end, she breaks it off because... Oh, this is kind of sad that, like... I think she found the relationship unstimulating because she was like, oh, well, the other relationships are so passionate. And it's like, no, there's just loads of fucking drama with them. But I think people can get to a point where they've been treated so badly by everyone, they don't know how to be treated well.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
So they make shit decisions because they actually don't know how to handle being in a... I was so worried about that when I got with my partner now that I was like... I was definitely like that at the beginning, that I just didn't know how to be treated well. So I was like, just crackers. My big fear, like, that was giving me anxiety was like, what if I'm just broken and I only really know how to treat someone like a cunt and be treated like a cunt? But thankfully, I'm an absolute angel now. And
it's all worked out well.
So, you know, after she had her eyes sorted out, right, because she had her driving licence taken off her, she gets her driving licence back, Carol, and she's like, right, I'm going to buy a car. And Doug's like, I want to pick it. So he picks this 1973 blue Buick station wagon. Now, it's too big for her. She's got no fucking idea. She can't see that well, so she's got no peripheral vision. God. So she keeps, like, crashing it and scraping it.
Like Mr.
One
Magoo.
time... Well, one time she's in it and she tries to park and it bumps into something, and as it bumps into something, a knife falls out of the sun visor onto her lap. So she's like, Doug, what is this massive knife in the car? And he said, you know what, I've got it in there for protection, and actually I feel very nervous about you not having any protection, so I've been thinking about talking about this for a while. I really think that you should have a gun. It's not safe out there. And she was like, really? And he was like, yeah. So April 24th, they go to a pawn shop and they pick out 2 guns, and they have to be registered in Carol's name because he's got previous criminal record for robbery, which, by the way, she thinks is really fucking glamorous. So 3 weeks later, they get the guns on May 16th. I don't know why 3 weeks. My theory is that it's a pawn shop, and is it sometimes you can't buy it till it's been a certain amount of time?
Yeah, you've got to wait until...
Someone can't buy it back.
Yeah.
God, that's fucking grim. Ugh. So May 16th, they go and collect 25 caliber Raven. They were quite little guns, and that's why she was like, oh, it looks like a toy. And she got 3 boxes of ammunition, and they drive somewhere and they go away and they practice, right? And she was like, oh, with the gun in the back of his jeans, he looks so heroic. And she just, the more weird shit happens, the more she loves it. Now at this point, her oldest kid, Chris, right, is like, I hate this guy and I hate how he treats my mum and I hate our life. So he's like, please can we leave? Please can you leave him? And she's like, no. And he's like screaming. Chris is like screaming at her. He's like, get him out. He's got to go. And she slaps him around the face. And that's the point where Chris is like, uh-oh, she used to put us first and now it's him. And after that point, the relationship with the kids is so grim. They beat him together. Doug and Carol beat Chris. And she, like, used to stop violence towards the kids, and now she's joining in with it. And she used to say, oh, I take the belt off him so he doesn't hit you too hard, and I do it. But when Chris talked about it later, he was like, no, it's because she enjoyed it as well. She pretended it was to protect me, but it's because she enjoyed doing it. This gets really dark here. So one day he gets Chris to stand up in, like, the living room, and she's there, Carol's there, and he explains how he would kill him. He gets a knife and he was like, stand up. And he was like, I would push it through your back and it would go through into your heart. And then in graphic detail, he'd describe what he would do to him.
Ugh, I hate it.
She says nothing. Carol says nothing. She just sits there. And fucking poor Chris, like, he becomes extremely withdrawn. Obviously, around this time, he starts getting excruciating headaches, which are probably caused by extreme stress and anxiety and depression. Mm-hmm. Doug always calls him, he uses the F word, that's a homophobic slur. That's just how he refers to him around the house. And then the youngest kid, David, is fucking terrified because he's just watching his big brother get battered. He frequently punches him in the stomach and the kidneys. Now, when they talk about this later with Chris, there's so much of this stuff he doesn't remember because he's obviously repressed it. Mm-hmm. So it's only the fact that David had witnessed a lot of this that he starts to even, like, recall it. Now, David and Chris said, we felt like this whole time we'd been fighting for Mum, and then this is the point where we lost. She's gone, he's won. So he gets more erratic. Duck gets more and more erratic, and she has to do more extreme things to please him. He stops wanting sex at all. So she's like, oh God, like, what does this mean? That was like one of the ways I could keep him happy and was a bond between us. So he was like, no, I don't want to have sex with you. So she's obviously feeling very rejected. And then he would go and get sex workers. And she's like, can I come with you? He's like, yeah, if you want. So she would sit in the back seat. Like when people take their parents on a driving lesson, which, by the way, I think is weird.
That is weird. I 100% agree.
It is weird.
It's fucking
isn't
weird.
It? The only time you do it is if I had a teenage daughter and it was a creepy driving instructor. I'll be like, I'll be in the car the whole time.
Yeah, like, but it's weird.
Yeah. So she would sit in the back seat and watch them try and give him oral sex, but quite often it didn't work.
Carol.
I know, Carol.
Get some fucking gumption.
Yeah. Do you know what the weird part is? He'd be like, right, suck me off. And they wouldn't be able to get him hard. And Carol was like, yeah, see, only I can do it. So she's like a sort of weird kind of satisfaction from the fact that, like, yeah, only I can pleasure him properly. It's an absolutely bonkers situation, obviously.
It really is.
So he's in and out of her flat at this point, more so than ever, like staying for shorter amounts of time. And every time he moved out, he was like, this is your fault. It's because of your mood swings. You're jealous. You're possessive. And the whole time he's trying to replace her. So he's going around the bars trying to find someone else to fucking mooch off. Ugh. But even when he met them and connected with them, none of them were into any of his weird dark shit. And Carol was. And that's ultimately his goal. So he gets a new girlfriend for a bit. Last 2 days. She moves him in for 2 days and then is like, yeah, get out of my house. He meets another woman. They start going out to dinner together, but she would never have sex with him. And then one night he's like, right, I'm going to go for the big play. So he brings us to an orgy, which is a weird thing to do with someone who doesn't want to have sex with you and be like, yeah, you know, we've been to the cinema, we've been to a comedy club, we went to an art gallery. Next step, I think it's an orgy.
Yeah, like, no thank you.
There's definitely 10-pin bowling before you get there, right?
100%.
Although I'd rather go to an orgy than do 10-pin bowling.
I love bowling. Absolutely love it.
Do you know what it is with bowling? Is when you bowl the thing, the ball, and then you watch it, I literally, as you walk back to your friends, feels like the longest, most self-conscious walk of my fucking life.
Why?
I don't know what it is, but I couldn't feel more like I don't know how to act. I'm like, what's my hand doing now?
Yeah, like
why is one hand round my own throat and the other one's up my ass? Like, I've just panicked. Like, what is happening? I just cut. Yeah. And also, you're like, oh, bowling's fun. And then you're like, oh, God, why is there so many games?
I like it. I think it's good fun.
Nah, don't like the shoes. Anyway, so they go to an orgy and then they go back to her house that night and then they're like, right, we're going to have sex. It does work. Although she doesn't do anything at the orgy. She just sits in the bar.
I'll just watch.
Yeah,
it's like I've not brought my swimming costume. I'll just sit here, it's all right. I'll watch the bags.
I've not bought my diaphragm, so I'll just watch.
Just sat there with a lot of coats and handbags. Just like nodding at people going past.
As jizz flies past her head.
I'll be like, sorry, I'm on my period.
Well, they go back to her house and it's like, it is on. So he starts getting undressed and he's got a pair of green silk ladies' underwear on. And she takes down his jeans and just bursts out laughing. And is like, absolutely not. And he still stays over. And then they're chatting the next day and they still sort of like going to see each other. They just weren't banging. And then he goes, yeah, I mean, like, it'd be so nice to find out what you're into. Like, you know, like, what your fantasies. Like, you talk about that ex-boyfriend who's a dickhead. Like, I'd be happy to kill him. And she's like, yeah, this isn't going anywhere.
Bye-bye.
And just bins him off.
Yeah.
Which is reassuring that he's tried this with a lot of women. And most women are like, yeah, fuck off, mate. It's only Carol who's like, yes, please. So he's at Viking Bar in North Hollywood one night. And again, is scouting for women who with low self-esteem, tend to be overweight. And he meets this woman who invites him home, and he just immediately moves in with her. And she's got 2 kids, and they meet like that night. And it is so obvious from that he doesn't have an apartment. This is the point where we were like, he's not got a flat.
No.
The fact that he moves in with people on the first night. So around this time, Carol scrapes the side of the Buick because she can't fucking see anything to park it. Carol. And they have a massive argument about it. And she was like, fine, I'll get my own car. So she buys herself a new car May 31st. And she goes, right, you can have the station wagon. Then I won't scratch it. So he was like, okay, well, I want to take it out for a test drive. And he brings it back the next day and she goes in. The gear stick is like cracked and the passenger door's dented. And she was like, what the hell has happened in my car? And he was like, I was cleaning my gun inside and it went off and the bullet bounced off the gear stick and ricocheted into the door.
Okay.
And she didn't believe him at all. And this is the point where the first time she does something good, at that point she was like, he's getting worse and worse here. And she applies to give custody of the 2 children to Grant Bundy, who's the paternal grandparent. Mm-hmm. And on June 9th, not very long afterwards, she puts them on the plane and she just sends them to the grandparents.
Which I bet was a fucking relief for them.
Of course. So they're safe now. And Doug has still got another girlfriend at this point, but he breaks it off and then comes back and suddenly the kids aren't there. And he's like, I really want to make a go of it with you, Carol. Like, I'm going to move in properly because also the kids aren't around. And this is where everything starts to escalate from here.
Yes. Well, fucking hell, there's a lot about them, isn't there?
There is, I know. And that brings us back up to our first murder. I really thought we covered it all.
I know.
But that's like another hour of madness.
Well, we just wanted to do it. Well, you did a lot of the heavy lifting there, so I'm going to take the heavy lifting with the murders at the next episode, which I can't wait for.
God love you.
Yeah, there is a lot there. Fucking hell. What a journey.
I can't figure out what year this is all happening in. What year is it?
It's like 1980, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, also at this time he does a weird thing that...
Did he? That's surprising.
So in February 1980, right, when he's working at that Jurgen's factory, doing the night shifts, he sets fire to that car. And later he will brag to Carol that the reason he did that is it was to destroy evidence. So, like, that's just something I want to say in case I forget to say it later. There you go. Just a fact, just a morsel to entice you back to part 3 of the longest fucking podcast in the world. Oh, and we might have news very soon about a Christmas show, and it's going to be a special one, a very special one. I'm going to send you pictures of my outfit now, Rachel. And,
I can't wait.
Yeah, I'm going to go really big for this one.
Excellent. I'll be doing the same when I've decided what I'm going to be wearing. I'm terrible at the minute. My mind's frazzled at the minute. Got lots
because of being on tour and everything else?
Bits and bobs, yeah. You know, it's like, when everything happens at once. But it's not like bad things happening at once. It's always like, these are all positive, good things. But I want it to be like in a month and and everything's settled,
I just want to hibernate now until it's Christmas. Yeah. I quite like to stop working. Honestly, I really wish I was fucking rich. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm doing absolutely fine, especially considering how I was, but like, I have to work. I earn way more than I could ever imagine earning when, going to the University of fucking Salford, and when I was on like 12 grand a year for years and years and years, but I have to work fucking loads to do it. So
yeah, that's it. It is. I just want to be one of those rich cunts.
Yeah, I want to be one of those rich cunts who doesn't have to do anything for it. God, that would be, it'd be really nice for like 3 weeks, and then obviously I'd want to work again, but yeah.
But thank you to everyone who's come to see me on tour. The tour dates are still happening. Nottingham this coming Tuesday. This might be out by then. Then I'm Bristol on Friday, the something of this month. I'm terrible at this. Just have a look at my social media. It's all on there.
Yeah, and I will have done the Aberystwyth Comedy Festival by the time this comes out. I don't think there's anything else to mention, really, live gig-wise.
I think that's it.
You'll hear more, hopefully, next week about what we're going to plan to do for the old Crimbo.
Yeah,
and thank you so much for listening. Sorry that this is sort of like circling back, but I just thought all that information was too interesting to leave out.
Yes. Thank you for listening.
Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.
Bye.